Welcome again. So the first session is on the bureaucratic leadership and bureaucratic leadership. So we all know that Indian education system is the largest in the world. We have around 265 million children enrolled, on par with the China. Around 10 million teachers. Half of them are in the government schools. The face of the schooling system, education system, are the schools and the teachers, but there is a lot that goes behind. So we have a huge bureaucratic system at the lower, middle, and the upper level who are involved in supporting the teachers and the schools in their academic and also administrative tasks. Often, just like the movie where we primarily see the actors on the screen, there is a lot of things that actually happen at the background. If the background team is not supportive and is not efficient, we see the system actually crumbling. Okay. So, and these leaders are also bureaucratic, also responsible for bringing the grand policy objectives like NEP 2020 into reality. So today's session will dive deeper into the bureaucratic functioning and bureaucratic capacity, and largely we try to address the question on how we can ensure that our bureaucracy, particularly the lower middle, function effectively and provide necessary support to the teachers, schools, and children. And how can we ensure that the policies like NEP are implemented both in letter and spirit, overcoming systemic barriers that still persist. Okay. So it's a pleasure to welcome today's panel members, Professor Rishikesh from Azim Premji University, Professor Somen Chattopadhyay from JNU, and my friend Vaijayanti from Akshara Foundation in Bangalore. Okay, thank you. Okay, the first question I would like to ask is for Rishikesh. So often the education officials at the cluster and the block level, so they struggle with performing their daily duties in the administrative tasks and also the academic support. Often the academic tasks are largely neglected. So there is a big gap between the stated role of these bureaucrats and the actual role that they are performing. So I would like to ask Rishikesh, what is your view on actually addressing this gap? Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Professor Shiva, for inviting me and for everyone here for being here today. I'm sorry I wasn't there yesterday to listen to some of the very senior educationists that are here. In fact, Vimalaji, Suvirji, Professor Padma, because when I started engaging with the education system more than 25 years ago, they were the senior scholars whom we were listening to, hearing as to what they are saying about our system. And I don't know what kind of impression it will leave, but then even today we continue to pretty much say the same things. And that says a lot about what has happened on the ground. I think hence it's something that we really need to think very seriously about. A lot of youngsters here, the optimism is that though things have remained the same in many ways, there are many positives, and I think the work that has happened has built a certain kind of a foundation. But to just tell you about one thing that has remained the same, for instance, administrative work being more superior than academic work is something I think which has just remained the same. There have been multiple reports by many institutions, by many researchers that these scholars that I mentioned have led. But in terms of the policy directives, there is not much that has come in. Though there have been a few guidelines, a few reports, but then none of it has really hit the ground to make the changes. It's something that I don't think has to be mentioned in detail. All of you working in education on the ground know that an academic person like the cluster resource coordinator, who is supposed to really bring together schools at a very local level, engage in academic work, improve the quality, has been gobbled up by the administration. and many times referred to as the courier person. Not to demean the role a courier person plays today in the modern economy, but then do we need a qualified teacher? Invariably, CRC is a qualified teacher. Uh, these days, in fact, many states also ask them to write a qualifying exam to become a CRC. After all that, do we need that person to be delivering messages from one school to another? Right now, why is that happen? I think we need to now get into figuring as to why these things have happened and how is it that we can change it. If we keep waiting for many other things at a systemic level to fall into place, maybe the wait like this would be quite endless. So we need to figure out now, I think, how is it that we enable the support to these support systems. These were all set up as support system, CRC, and then at the block level, the BRC, and then all the way at the district level, the diets. How do we ensure that these support system, in fact, go on to actually playing that role of being the academic support for teachers is something that we have to invest in. But one thing I think what many of us have realized now is that will not happen only by working with the academic support system. We will have to work with the administrative system. Because of the lack of capacity in the administrative system, anybody who's put into the system gets gobbled up, usurped by the administrative system. So, for instance, if you look at the block level, the block education office has about 25 people to look at the administration of about 2,000 schools. Now, moment you set up a BRC, a full staff BRC with 5 coordinators and all those cluster resource coordinators, they all get taken over by the BO's office because there is so much of administrative work there. So, but then we know that there is very little attention that we paid to the BO's office. Sometime back, we did a BO process study, and in fact, at the end of the study, we all of those who were involved in the study, we had much more empathy to the BO and people in the BO's office in terms of the number of work, the kinds of work that they were supposed to do. There were hundreds of registers that they had to maintain, and we all know. I mean, many times it's in duplicates and triplicates also. Of course, on the lighter side, they say that even if the digital economy goes for a bust, India will be safe because we have this plan B, plan C, paperwork. But on a serious note, we talk about technology in the classroom. There is very little technology that the BO's office is using where it would probably be most useful, right? And try and support them. Of course, we can't just go and put in technology there, but how is it that we work with the BO's office to ensure that technology brings in the efficiency and along with also the transparency? Of course, since this is going to be more of an open discussion, I will stop here. Hope these are some thoughts that I can stop here with and we can move ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So following up on this question, so there are stated roles which are in the policy documents for the bureaucrats, but along with that we have a parallel system of educationalists outside, NGOs, think tanks, which bring together their own programs, interventions, and it lies upon the bureaucrat to take it up and work on this. And often these things are put on a mission mode. Okay, we have an intervention for 2 months, 3 months, and then they have to do this in addition to their regular rules. Okay, and and already there is a lack of capacity within the bureaucracy, and there is a huge vacancy. To give an example here, in Maharashtra, so almost there is 40% vacancies in the CRCs. How are they able to manage these things and how do they perceive the workload put by the new interventions that NGOs and other think tanks actually propose? So this is a question to Vijay. It's on it.
Yeah. Thank you, Shiva. Thank you, LFP and Flame University for inviting me. I think I would like to take that question slightly differently, In the sense, it's not just NGOs pushing their agenda, etc. In a federal setup like India, you have a central government which also kind of controls a lot as to what needs to happen at the state level, right? So whatever, for example, FLN mission, if the central government decides that we need to have FLN mission, then it will be, kind of They will send it across all the circulars or whatever. GOs would have been sent to the state government, and state machinery would start working towards that, right? Despite of whatever their priorities, etc. For example, when FLN came in, I thought I should share my experience with Karnataka. Karnataka already had a Nalikali system, right? The Nalikali also, was trying to handle quite a bit of FLN, foundational literacy and numeracy. Well, there were a lot of issues. I mean, most of the researchers and departmental kind of studies came up with saying that Nalikali is focusing more on literacy and less on maths, numeracy, etc. Well, you can always kind of design something around developing or strengthening numeracy related programs and so on and so forth. But the FLN kind of was kind of imposed on the state government. Now here there are two, three things. One is you had Nipun Bharat. It kind of designed several learning outcomes and things like that. And you also had NCRT, which said that these are the learning outcomes. And at the state level, you have Nalikali learning outcomes, and you also have FLN kind of a state's own FLN kind of a stuff. So with all the things, I could see a lot of confusion being created across different levels. Rishi and me are part of Nalikali Kosha, and we are also part of some of the learning outcome workshops, etc. Teachers, I mean the resource persons as well as the state level officers, they really didn't know how to handle the whole thing. I mean, they were completely confused because your academic year is starting. You need to think about what needs to go to the schools, books or the cards or whatever, so on and so forth. And you have been asked to, create some strategies around FLN. So I somehow feel the federal system is creating more confusion than kind of helping each other, right? I think that's the first thing. And coming to bureaucracy, I don't think we should be judgmental about it is good, it is bad, it is worse, or whatever. We have to live with that. In fact, I still remember when the order came from the central government, the principal secretary Karnataka was wondering what should we do, how do we handle it. And he immediately called CPI as well as, by the way, it is not just the principal secretary education. Below him, you have Commissionerate for Public Instructions, you also have SSA. We have created all these institutions, right? All of them should be talking to each other and should be solving some kind of a problem. So, let me stop at this because there are a lot of issues. Probably over the discussion we can kind of take it forward.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So my question was largely focused on, there are many of these programs which are done on a so-called mission mode, which Yamni used to say that Indian bureaucracy works in bursts. So there is a small, suddenly an order comes from the top, and then entire bureaucracy is made to work on those. And then the core functions are neglected of. This will include even the things like, organizing, let's say, constitutional day suddenly, or some other day. So then the core functions of teaching and academic functions, they are neglected. And along with that, if new age things like digital apps that come out. Yesterday, Avni Kapoor was actually telling that in Rajasthan they had 40 different apps, and the bureaucrats were made to, even the teachers, they were made to enter data into all of this. So that adds to the burden.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then the entire bureaucratic vertical is taught to follow orders, right? It has to be there in order form, and you need to deliver. That's it. And everything moves through files, right? So that we should keep. Absolutely, everybody finds it a burden, and I think it also indirectly impacts the instructional time in the classroom. That again is also an issue, right?
Yeah. I'll come to higher education a little later. So next question, I think Vaijayanti already touched upon it. So bureaucracy, the orders come from the top. Orders come from the top, and I think both Rishi and Vaijayanti, you have experience in working with top level bureaucrats, and many of whom are frequently transferred and they are from different departments. So, a person from petroleum may be transferred to become an SPD in of SS Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. And do they really understand the roles and responsibilities? And how do this lack of experience and limited learning time that they have, impact the functioning of the bureaucracy? And many a times they give order, as you just said, top down order, okay, and they have very unrealistic expectations on the lower level bureaucracy and they are supposed to deliver. So what kind of impact you can have, both of you can?
Okay. Yeah. Very sensitive question in some sense, right? But then, one of the things that has changed, I mean, from 20, 25 years ago, when probably a principal secretary many times it just lasted a couple of months. Now, more or less across states, we have a couple of years of principal secretaries being in the same position. But still, that is there. I mean, the issue of a general administration service is that from a coal or petroleum to education or whatever happens. But if with the longer duration, there is some bit of learning that they can have in the system in that department before they can start doing things. But we continue to see some very pet ideas that they come with without really having any knowledge of the department or the domain, and trying to push through a certain order. And that is why, in fact, even the ownership isn't there, because the ground from the lower level bureaucracy understand and know that some of these things just won't work, but it's coming in an order, it has to be implemented, that's the performance measure. So one of the reasons why many things fall flat is that you don't take the ownership, you don't listen to the lower level bureaucracy, you have your pet idea which you want to push down. But having said that, I think today there is much more interaction that we get to see with the bureaucrat than what I used to see a few decades ago. That is there. They are more open now. They at least, even if they have a pet idea first, they try to listen and see whether there are some inputs into that idea which can be incorporated. So those things happen. Long term, of course, there are many reports. I not gone through them, but then administrative reform reports are there. But so in the long term, hopefully we'll have a cadre or a service specifically for, if not for education, at least for the social sector. Difficult things, because we all know to become a chief secretary, you need to have had as many portfolios, right? So how it gets sorted, finally decided, is a different thing. But then at the long term, that is there. But then currently, what one can do is, today almost every state has a PMU. Right, and influential civil society organizations, members in the PMU, who many of these top level bureaucrats listen to. And I think it is today, the onus is really on the civil society organizations in these PMUs to bring in that expertise, or bring in that knowledge that is there out there in the ground up to the top level, so that the decision making is a much involved and much informed one. And I think we should do that, because that really has become the connect now, whether we like it or not, between the top level bureaucracy and the middle and the lower level bureaucracy. Yeah.
Yeah, couple of things. One is, yeah, Rishi said yes, at least in Karnataka, we had principal secretaries staying for 2-3 years. But when it comes to SPDs and commissioners for public instruction, I was just looking at the data, between 2010 to 2023-24, we have seen around 13, SPDs, around 10 CPI. Right? How do you work with the system? Right? So it is not all that easy. And I have my own reservation about the PMUs and things like that. Earlier it was much easier to approach the principal secretaries and, the civil society, especially the local civil society, they knew what needs to be done. Right? They have better understanding about problems and, some of the solutions and the strategies, so on and so forth. But if you have a PMU, which is kind of created and imposed from outside, then I think it is more problematic, I feel. Right? And so far as bureaucrats' understanding of education is concerned, typically if you have a principal secretary, you would have seen many departments, and they will be doing a lot of administrative work, but they do take care of, improving their knowledge or understanding of the situation through some of the resource groups and things like that. That has been consistently happening in Karnataka, I must say. But coming to the relationship between the principal secretary and I'm not even talking about commissioner and SPD. Now I'm coming to the lower levels. Yes, there's a lot of disconnect between these people, right? In fact, in my experience in couple of studies when we did, the lower level officers would say, "Madam, why don't you talk?" They won't listen to us, which I feel is quite discouraging. I want them to speak, not us, right? So typically it is a thinking that the higher level officials would listen to outsiders than or trust outsiders than their own people. At least I see that kind of a thing between, I mean, they call it sarkar. Sarkar ke hogi the. That is a secretariat, right? Sarkar. And then coming to, commissioner and SSA, they are kind of, they will have day-to-day kind of transaction with the lower level officers or even the directors of SERT, primary, secondary, and so on and so forth, right? But typically, you feel that I wouldn't call it they're scared, but there is a disconnect, I feel, you know, and well, that is how it is, unfortunately. But as I said, I mean, because we had so many, SPDs being changed and commissioners being changed, the continuity becomes an issue. You start with all over again, if you're a civil society, if you are working on some programs, you need to start. I mean, there is a standard thing. I keep one PPT. I would know that I need to repeat it again and again and again, right? You would feel that okay, this person has understood. Now things would be much better. But the next month, next day rather, when I wake up and look at the newspaper, I see this person has been transferred. That is how it is, unfortunately. I feel at least if they are there for 2-3 years minimum, then things might, happen at a rapid rate.
Continuing on this, in the colonial time, we used to have this professional Indian educational services, just discontinued, I guess, in 1920s. So, and I think NEP briefly in the earlier report it said that we need to restart professional services because education is such a complex issue. School education itself is so broad and complex, and higher education is a totally different ballgame. And often people coming from totally different background, they don't have the time to understand this. What's your view on it?
I think, I mean, there has been a lot written on whether an Indian education service would give the solutions or would add to the problem, right? I mean, I think, there is a debate there. So it's not really a magic pill. But I think, all that is wishful thinking also, even if we think that that has a better solution than what we currently have. Currently, we have to work with this. How do we work with this? Because all of us are here working on different projects. We are there on the field. And this reality that Vaijayanti spoke of, without knowing a top senior bureaucrat changing any of those three, principal secretary, commissioner, or SPD, they're the top three decision makers. Anybody can change overnight. Given that reality now, how do we work? That really needs to be where and what we think about in terms of innovation, in terms of engaging with the bureaucracy. One of the things that we found, I think many of us and all of you may subscribe to this, that building the rapport with the mid-level and the lower-level bureaucracy is very critical, because what happens is even when the top-level bureaucrats change, with that rapport you can continue many of the projects without it being suddenly or abruptly stopped. And if you don't have that rapport, it would stop because they're looking up for a certain decision as soon as there is a change happen. If there is a rapport, you know that many things slightly aligned to the new bureaucrats, certain vision or ideas, you could carry on. And in fact, with this rapport, probably even if they don't feel comfortable, they will very openly share that, can we together go and meet and convince this person? So very quickly give a briefing. So that is something that I think we all should do, and most of us, that's the way probably we are working by doing that, and that is a solution for the moment. Long-term solutions are all of course, policy related. But then again, I mean, there is a policy already that you can't arbitrarily transfer bureaucrats just because there is a change of government. They have, I think, now the agreed norm is 2 years, even for at this principal secretary level. But these are violated. But how do we now handle and deal with that is crucial. And for building this rapport, it is supposed, of course, it's collaborative work, right? And that's the reason why I think Vajanti's apprehension of the PMUs as well, wherein just one or two people try to kind of manage in a technocratic way bureaucracy, but then if you instead of that do it in a very collaborative manner. I mean, we have very good examples also, right? I mean, in fact, Professor Padma's work at Chamarajanagar Diet, wherein this group had worked so collaboratively there. Now, those are the kinds of examples that can be taken up to different levels, even right up to the state level, wherein then there is a much greater ownership, and the sustainability of these initiatives then would go on for a long time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the ownership is the right word, right? If they own it, I think they just take it forward. For example, in Akshara, we have been working on numeracy, right? It was announced in 2014 budget that Government of Karnataka will work with Akshara Foundation across all the schools on numeracy. Between 2014 February till 2016 April, I might have almost lived only in the secretariat or at the Vidhan Sauda. We had almost around 89 signatures. That's why I said file speaks, right? Whether you're there or not, there should be some kind of a comment, suggestion, observation that would have been done from the principal secretary's office to the case worker to everybody. In fact, it's other way around. Case worker, and then comes the SADPI, then comes the director, then that is how it is done. So the files typically are maintained, and that is what they reflect. So it is kind of it is very long period it takes something to happen. All that we need to have is patience. And it is not that, the system is corrupt. That is not true always. That is how the system works, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. So we can't build a strong education system without strengthening the higher education. In fact, all the teachers, all of us are products of higher education. And all three of us have been teaching for quite some years. And then now I would like to move on to the bureaucracy in higher education. So mainly to Professor Somen. So Indian higher education system is also vast and extremely complex. And we have around 43 million students, 1,100 plus universities, many of them are private and also public, 44,000 colleges, and it is rapidly growing. If you actually look at higher education, it more than tripled, gross enrollment ratio more than tripled in the last 20 years. Okay. And these institutions come in varying sizes, specializations, levels, quality. And there is a broad consensus that Indian higher education system is not delivering the quality. It has a scale, it is approaching a scale but not quality. Okay. So I just want to ask Professor Somen, so can you delve into some key structural issues in the regulations that are impeding the growth of public higher education institutions, okay, on the center and also the state level?
Thank you. I think I should begin by expressing my gratitude to LFE and Fleming University for giving me the opportunity here. My responses will be situated in the context of higher education, so I've been enjoying all the discussion that we have been having since yesterday in the context of school education and governance. Yeah. See, if you read NEP draft and NEP 2020, they said that the regulatory intervention in Indian higher education has suffocated the faculty, stifled the faculty of being creative and innovative. Now, when I look at the role of bureaucracy, it is involved in two different stages. First, it is the designing of the regulatory interventions and at the intervention stage. Now, designing or framing a regulatory framework is inherently problematic for higher education because of two fundamental problems. One is the very delicate negotiation between autonomy and accountability, and the diversity which the university should celebrate, and therefore it is the onus, it is the responsibility of the regulatory bodies to promote diversity. At the same time, to earn credibility, you have to straitjacket the regulatory intervention. When you straitjacket, then you are, of course, blurring the distinctions across the university system. Now, if you look at some of the policy initiatives, you will see that the Government of India or UGC has tried to segregate the university system through graded autonomy and regulate differently. Category 1 institution based on the NAAC score and ranking, Category 2 and Category 3, and then you have got the institutions of eminence. Now, where does lie the role of the bureaucracy here? In order to understand it, you have to make a distinction between public and private and center and the state. The problem lies with the implementation. You know, what happens in higher education, this is true for the entire education system, in fact, that there is no technology, right? So the input-output conversion is up to the moral standard that we have, high moral standard and utmost dedication that we are supposed to exhibit, teaching and research. Now, you see, the problem begins with the appointment of the head of the institutions. And on certain occasions, I've found the head of the institutions, I mean the vice chancellor, succumb to the bureaucratic pressure. And in some private universities, the vice chancellors emit the right kind of signal to the bureaucracy so that they try to uphold scholarship. Now, academic corruption in India, higher education, is very, very pervasive, both in teaching and research. Now, how do you define corruption? It's a big issue, because it's not that we are making money out of this, but I would like to define corruption in terms of the extent of dedication that one has to exhibit in whatever we are doing. So the bureaucracy plays a very important role because, they actually implement the regulatory framework within the university. Now, the role of the bureaucracy within higher education is very different from that of school education. Why? Because the teachers in higher education at the highest level of teaching and doing research should have the autonomy. And universities are all very unique. Look at this Flem University, the very mandate is quite unique in the country today. Now, here, the bureaucrats very often suffocate the implementation of, the stifle or the obstruct the implementation of certain policies. And this is where the problem lies. So, both in design as well as in implementation, bureaucrats do play a very important role. See, the understanding of the bureaucrats have to be enhanced. In fact, I would say the bureaucrats have been a major deterrent for Indian higher education. Now, why? Because their understanding of higher education, what does scholarship mean or indicate? What is research? How much autonomy should be given? It's not that all of us have really respected autonomy because of the high degree of differentiation. Now, when it comes to the constraint is, see, the regulatory intervention is like, defining the rules of the game. So we play cricket at different levels, starting from the Ranji to all the way, first division Ranji and, to the test cricket. We change the rules of the game, but the quality essentially depends on the capacity. And there are two major implements of capacity. One is the capacity of us to teach and do research, the human capital I would mean, and the capacity in terms of the funding. So one major challenge for the public universities, and center and state, the differences is actually very, very acute, is the inadequate funding. If you look at the union budget, how the budgetary allocations have been raised over the years and how they have been directed towards certain sectors, you will find that, I'll not go into the details of it, that the problem is that the state universities are not getting adequate funds. Center universities also, we have been pushed to take loans, raise fee and all, but funding is utterly inadequate. So the regulation, funding, and the bureaucratic mindset towards the faculty. I'm just not giving an example of a particular university here. It's a little delicate. Somebody told me, so a finance officer of a university, that look, there's a massive cut in the funding, but the ranking of a particular university has not really declined. So we are giving you the money, you can maintain the tempo of teaching and research without getting adequate funds. So why should I give you funds? And look at the bureaucratic intervention. I will not also take the name of the state here. See, the teachers, when they attend the college or universities at 9:30, there's a fax to the governor office that the teachers have come. Again at 5 or 5:30, there's another fax to the governor office. So look at so there is a huge difference across the state. How do the governors and the vice chancellor or the minister of education look at higher education, whether they have enough respect for the faculty? I understand that we have also abused the faculty. I'm not saying that I am for both, but the differentiation is so huge that it becomes very, very problematic.
Yeah, so following up on this, I think Manish Sabharwal calls it as a bureaucratic cholesterol that is there. In the higher education sector, there is bureaucracy within the university and bureaucracy across the regulatory bodies. Okay. So coming to the regulatory body, let's say UGC is one of them, and being part of a private university and also I was at the IIT before, so I've seen both the public and the private. So the regulation impacts the quality of the functioning of the private universities a lot, because they will say suddenly, unless you have the NAC 1 ranking, you may not get certain things. Unless you have clearing certain regulations in the UGC, you will not get funding from the government agencies. So funding wise, even the state and also private universities suffer a lot. And recent NEP says that we should have only light and tight regulation, and there should not be a distinction between the public and the private universities. And also the UGC 1956 thing, they want to repeal the UGC and also make all the regulatory agencies, let's say UGC, AICT, and then Bar Council, combined into a single higher education council of India. Do you think this new body that NEP recommends and also government may be acting on this, so will it centralize and streamline the regulations and improve the outcomes, or it would introduce new complexity that may stifle the institutional autonomy and innovation?
See, in order to understand the regulatory structure that the NEP has recommended, it's in the process, right? I mean, it has not yet been fully implemented. You have to understand the very objective of NEP. And the way I understand NEP, that there is a very strong political rationality, which is also informed by economic rationality. Economic rationality is well articulated in the ABC, Academic Bank of Credit. Because whenever we are talking about the future readiness and the very purpose of higher education, I believe that NEP has to be read with the national credit framework and the emphasis which is being given on the skill education. So one of the objectives of NEP, all of you read it several times, is that gross enrollment rate has to be raised to 50%. And what is more important here, the 50% of 50% should have exposure to the skill education. Now, how do you achieve skill education? You have to achieve skill education by giving autonomy to the students, right? And then the IT comes into the picture. So the regulatory intervention that NEP has recommended is actually to foster the mobility of the students across general, professional, even national and international. And all this mobility means you are actually constructing a well-regulated higher education market. So that is the purpose. The students' mobility, I believe, is at the center of the NEP objective, because everything falls in place if you understand what is the objective. Now, you said about what are the possible complexities. Complexities is what was also discussed by Mr. Swarup's lecture yesterday. The same thing, I also agree that if you are trying to build up a competitive situation, you're giving freedom to the students, you are giving freedom to the institutions to design our mandate and offer new courses, but you are not building up the capacity. Building up the capacity, we understand we lack, but at the same time, we also lack financial resources, right? So unless you build that up, it's not going to happen. So financial autonomy, there is a possible clash between financial autonomy and the autonomy of the faculty and the institution. And then you have to understand this one very interesting thing is there. It comes to my mind, I'm mentioning it. This is also within the part of regulatory intervention. One very good sentence which is there, I liked it in NEP, is about the institutional development plan. What does it say? I'm not saying whether it can be implemented. What NEP says that the teachers, students, administration, I mean the bureaucracy and the university authority should sit together and envision the future of the university collectively. Now, can we really sit together and envision the future of the university collectively? I'm not going into this because this is not, I mean, I should, it's a very delicate political thing, but the financial constraint comes in. And how the research fundings are also going to be allocated to the university. Anushandhan National Research Foundation has just been set up 3 weeks ago, possibly. So the funding and the challenges would come from massive emphasis on skill education. And then the labor market demand which is coming for the skill because of the AI, machine learning and all, also very, very fast. Can we really cope up? Can the institutions really cope up with this rapidly changing demand for skill? So those who can afford, they are going to the EdTech. So the differentiation between the system, got a potential to get more and more accentuated in the process. So both access and quality remain to be the concern because this competition will lead to a very bipolar kind of market in higher education.
Thank you very much.
Can I just quickly add a small thing to what Professor Soman said? I think that is a very pertinent point you made, sir, on having to see the NEP provisions holistically, and in the sense that there are one provision linking to another very closely. So, along with IDP, for instance, the Board of Governors plays a very crucial role in this imagination of higher education as NEP does. So that is really where the autonomy and accountability both would be addressed, right? And so it's very crucial that we look at it with all those threads.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, now a question to both of you. So there is an increasing, in higher education, there is an increasing focus on quantifying all the educational outcomes. So often prioritizing numbers over the substance, like number of papers you produce, number of Q1, Q2s, and also number of training programs you do. So that has created an like perverse incentive to publish in poor quality journals, and also for namesake attend the training programs and do a number of activities. In fact, the regulatory bodies actually force us to do those things. Okay? And then so, and also there is an thinking that okay, these regulatory bodies, they are know all. So there is so much complexity that you cannot compare the paper outputs in one field, let's say mathematics, with something in social sciences or in biology. There is varying in number. So how can we create a more balanced approach? So and also, is it possible, instead of going through this quantity driven approach, ask the institutions to move towards more self regulations rather than imposing regulations from the outside? Okay. So, and focus on core values and incentivizing equity and quality rather than the numbers.
So, in fact, that's precisely the direction in which NEP suggests that we move. But the problem is, not everyone understands it in the same spirit. Right? So, even now, when there are certain regulatory guidelines that are coming, they're focusing on quantitative measures. But then the fact that IDP needs to be in place is wherein in that institutional development plan, you also have individual development plans for each faculty. And it's when you do that, you can get away from the quantitative measures. For instance, for a university such as the one that I'm in, we have beyond the university teaching and other roles within the university, we also engage beyond the university as part of our foundation. Now, how do you account for that in, let's say, my workload annually? It can't happen at a macro level. It will have to be my individual development plan or contribution plan with my immediate supervisor and then finally the vice chancellor signing off. So there is a lot of work that the university bureaucracy would have to take on to move in the direction that NEP is talking of. And that's really where the autonomy needs to be seized. Unfortunately, in fact, now even some of the very elite universities in the country, apparently they are waiting for some kind of a guiding document to emerge from UGC, or if you're running engineering from AICT. But NEP is asking you to just forge your own pathways. First of all, set up a BOG, have these discussions that Professor Somin spoke of, create your IDPs, and move on, right? But then again, I mean, there is a different kind of messaging sometimes coming from some of these regulatory agencies. So there are those issues, but I would see them more as teething issues.
Before I come to you regarding this thing, let me just say why quantitative measure. Why quantitative measure? Because there are two reasons. One is the policymakers, mostly the bureaucrats and the ministers and whoever are there. They believe that the teachers are not intrinsically motivated and they have abused the autonomy. Ideally, we the teachers should be actually guided by our conscience and driven by prestige maximization. But that doesn't happen. So one is to make the faculty accountable. Second, there is also, if you look at NEP, the way university system is being envisaged to connect with the industry, there are two channels. One is the skill, supply of the skill graduates, and the second is the industry funding, and how do you collaborate and cooperate with the industry. So there are two major channels. Now, so therefore, there is a reorientation of the higher education system so that we can contribute more to the economy and the society. This is where the importance of the output measure comes in. Now, why this publish and the perish culture? You see, one simple statistic, as per the Web of Science, we are producing 2.5 lakh papers. And how many faculty are we? 1.5 million faculty. So, 100 of us are producing barely 15, 16 papers, if I keep aside the think tanks, research organizations, which is a terribly low per capita production. I'm using the word production in the number of papers. Now, NEP also says in the draft 2019 that there has been a proliferation of the fake journals. Now, the UGC care list has been, I will not mention anything about it. Then we have got the Scopus. Right? These are all very sensitive issues. So you can see that how, it has been abused. All this published versus British culture. Why is it happening? You have set the target, but we don't have the capacity to meet the target. So we are resorting to unfair means to achieve the target. It's not that all of us are corrupt. It's not that all of us are honest either. The highly differentiated system. And that's why NEP has also suggested is a fast track system beyond the UGC. Fast track system of those who are doing exceedingly well, they should be given the incentive to do this. But this publish versus perish and the usefulness of the citation index, I-10 or H index, whatever you do, they're all very, very problematic, but they do capture something. So that it is not about India, in the West also, publish versus this perish culture is very, very prominent. Here, the standard is at a very, very low level compared to what they've attained elsewhere.
Thank you very much. I think we'll have to conclude this because we need some time for the question answer session also. So thank you very much for this insightful comments. We touched upon so many aspects about the bureaucracy, both at the school level, and the school education level, and also at the higher education level. So I'm sure, like many of us here, would have key takeaways from this. So I would like to call upon people, if you have any questions, please ask. I don't know. It's all. I don't know. So maybe
since most of us are part of civil society here, I would just like, maybe a quick reflection on where civil society has failed in terms of strengthening bureaucratic capacity or trying to strengthen bureaucratic capacity, because clearly now civil society is being replaced by monopolistic capital, which is trying to come and do the same function that civil society presumably had. So where have we failed?
Well, would you like to, because there is, we had something in University.
I don't know which one you are referring to, but Ankur, I think we all together will have to really figure this out. I really don't have an answer to where we have failed in that sense. But one of the things I think we've done good is to get the confidence of the middle and the lower level bureaucracy. I think all of us together needs to take credit for the way we have engaged with the bureaucracy, particularly in school education. I think today, when anyone from the civil society approaches, let's say at the block level or the district level, any of the officers, we are not shunned the way it used to happen earlier, right? Which basically means over the last couple of decades, that work that has happened with them has been something which they have found very useful, and hence I think we are on a, at a positive level there. What is happening with some of the newer people coming in flush with funds straight at the state or the central level is not giving that required respect, right, to the people who are already there in the system, and that is really where at this point of time I'm seeing a bit of a friction, and people at the bureaucracy, the permanent bureaucracy, have issues, and they have shared it in person also. I'm sure many of us have also heard that.
You know, I think it's a very regional thing, Rishi, because I find that in many North Indian states, the governments have become pretty hostile to civil society organizations, and but they are very open to quote unquote corporate, as he says. They've become very open. Rajasthan has an MOU with almost all the big corporations. But what they're doing, but they have thrown all the NGOs out of or any space at all. So it's a very mixed. Karnataka is one thing. Even Tamil Nadu is somewhere in between. It's not all that great. Can I add one more point, which comes to your policy? I'm sorry. Many of these policies, like I was so much part of 1986 policy and POA and all that. Every subsequent policy is just a policy document for show. I don't think people sincerely believe it is there to be implemented, especially in the bureaucracy.
Thank you. Just to answer to your question, Ankur, I think civil societies, at least in Karnataka, have done fairly good job so far as the mid-level kind of bureaucracy, capacity building of mid-level. But there are some issues about continuity. Number two is about the sustainability also. How long we will go on, building their capacity. We need to build a capacity in such a way that it sustains with their own resources that are available within the system. We need to think about that as well, because every time a civil society being called to build the capacity of say BRC, CRC and things like that, that's fine. This year you may do, but what about next year? And it is a continuous process. So probably we need to think about that. What kind of a mechanism or a system that we need to develop? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Gopal. I've been working in the area of education leadership for almost a decade now. And taking to both these points, what really strikes me as amazing is that we tend to paint bureaucratic leadership in largely monotone colors as something as rule following. And I feel like, as what Rishi said in the beginning, we need to change things, otherwise, we'll be speaking the same things 20 years from now. So, the notion that I have really been working with, and I see it in practice very often, is that of how principals, teachers have a lot more discretionary power than we think they have. The idea of street level bureaucracy, as Lipsky calls it. And therefore, that's a great source of strength. The reason policies are not implemented as envisioned and they are always varied could actually be a fantastic thing for us, because it gives us a good research lens into how principals are adapting, how teachers are adapting what we think should be a very clear, defined fidelity of implementation kind of thing, and shifting that according to their context. So I think it will be a great source of strength that we could. And the question that I have for you is that, have you had any research on this, being part of the university networks, as to how, like, I'm implementing a project in Goa right now on large scale assessments, and the way we are even recommending how daily questions could be done in the class is being completely turned around. So first it was a source of angst, and now I'm actually fascinated by it. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Thanks, Gopal. Very, very true. I completely agree with you on that. And I think the kind of autonomy that exists, but many times not known for each of us stakeholders or whichever level, I think that is something that needs to be tapped upon. And there is, in fact, a lot of work, not necessarily from a research project point of view, but a lot of work that Azim Premji Foundation has been doing with regard to how teachers and principals as well can use that autonomy that already exists to do things that they otherwise feel constrained or feeling that order has not come to do that. So in fact, in many of the units at the ground level that we work in, we call these teaching learning centers. There are these exercises that happen. In fact, some of the workshops that we do with principals are on these. What are the things that you think you can do, and then we kind of explore whether that can be expanded further. And when you really look at it, analyze it, you can go far ahead than what you are doing till then. Yeah, just wanted to add to also what Vimlaji was saying. I completely agree with you that many states deal with the civil society organizations in many different ways, and sometimes hostile as well. But I think it is also to do with this new phenomena of people, the kind of let's say people coming into the PMUs, particularly with corporate funding and wanting to drive in a certain agenda that is being accepted by the top level bureaucracy, but not necessarily by the permanent bureaucracy. So there is that fiction that is there, and I think many of us who have worked on the ground level are with the permanent bureaucracy, and that's an advantage for us. Yeah. There is one research that we are doing in Tamil Nadu on the PMUs. A colleague of mine is doing that, and I think we would really look forward as to what comes out of that. It's particularly what is the feeling of, for instance, the teachers with regard to what the PMU is doing at the SCRT. So we look forward to what emerges from that study.
Sir, this is Ajay from Telangana. Sir, my basic
I
question.
think Inishi asked
Yeah.
raise their hand first, and we hardly have any time now. So if you can quickly ask the question and let Rishi answer it.
Okay. Uh, this is with regard to in bureaucracy, and when I say bureaucracy, it's not just bureaucratic officers, the leadership that we have across higher education or even school education for that matter. The fascination for new and innovation versus what we need to do consistently in education. I think that is something that we need to understand, because at all levels, any bureaucrat who's there for whether 2 years, 3 years, I want to do something new. And what you are doing, we don't learn from our predecessors, continue it and do it consistently. And in education, you cannot show everything, I mean, every change in that sense. And somehow, I think as leaders, we really need to understand it across levels and really work together. There, I think the point that Gopal made on street level bureaucracy, learning from the street level bureaucrats, as in the challenges that they have in implementing what needs to continue, what needs to be changed, I think, is the larger challenge or concern that we have in leadership.
Agree.
Agree. So, yeah, we'll agree. Yeah. Okay. So, so Veer wants to speak. Quick one.
So in its last year, the Manmohan government tried to put in place a protocol for bureaucrats coming into education to insist that SPDs should be there for 3 years at least, that they may not stop an ongoing program without an adequate evaluation, and so on, because it seems bureaucracy works on protocolization rather than any other way. That didn't happen because the government fell. But what I wanted to ask the panel is, do you think it's worth lobbying with the politicians for a protocol of this kind to be in place? Yes, the street bureaucrat and all of it is very important, but I think we need to tap that level also. Otherwise, we are a country with many beginnings, but with no middles and no endings, because we are always starting. What do you think?
Subirji, I mean, absolutely, something like that is what probably should come out of this conference, wherein we can get together to do that lobbying. As we understand, it's not going to be easy, because one of the reasons why this happens is, each top level bureaucrat wants to build their own portfolio. That is, their pathway to the chief secretary's chair. So we need to now lobby, see as to what kind of some of these aspects, at least. I mean, let them build their portfolio, let them come with new ideas, but some of these things, how do we ensure that the critical areas of work is not disturbed, destabilized because of some of these fancy ideas लेके बोलते
So I think we need to conclude. Sorry, it's 10
Yeah, yeah,
11:06. We really have to conclude.
Stop a second. Yeah, it may be a fancy, fascinating idea, but even the agendas of all these politicians and political parties, they keep changing, right? So how do you handle that? It's not all that easy.
Yeah, okay. With that, I think we'll have to conclude this. Thank you very much for being here. It's a wonderful session.